Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard, where we set out to remember and celebrate the lives of those who lived to entertain us by visiting their final resting places. Today we're back at Hollywood Forever Cemetery to visit such stars as Burt Reynolds, Anne Heche, Paul Reubens, Marsha Hunt, and many more. Join us, won't you? Hollywood Forever Cemetery, the most Hollywood of all cemeteries, nestled comfortably between major film studios and the Hollywood sign just off Santa Monica Boulevard. Here the stars from the very earliest days of silent Hollywood mingle with legends up into the modern era. It's been a few years since our last visit here. It was 2021 when the pandemic was still raging. We've lost some beloved stars in the years since. And in the veritable galaxy of stars that is this cemetery, there are always more famous folks to discover, more stories to uncover. If you haven't done so already, be sure to check out our first 5 Hollywood Forever Cemetery tour videos. Let's begin in the Chapel Columbarium, the gilded dome adorned with Hollywood Forever's favorite animal and the spirit animal of Hollywood at large, the peacock. Right at the top of the stairs on the left is the niche of Francine York. The model and actress got her start performing in nightclubs before making her way to film and television. Jerry Lewis would cast her in a number of his films, including It's Only Money and Cracking Up. She also played Sabrina on The Doll Squad. She made many memorable appearances on television, including playing Lydia Limpet on Batman, Venus on Bewitched, and Amanda on It Takes a Thief. The framed photo here is from a movie she did with Elvis titled Tickle Me in 1965. Francine died from cancer at age 80. Around the corner we find the niche and distinctive urn of Noel Toy. She was an actress and dancer who rose to fame in the 40s with her exotic fan dance, bubble dance, and nude performances. She was called the Chinese Sally Rand and the Chinese Pinup Girl, performing in San Francisco's Forbidden City, a popular Asian nightclub, and later in New York. She took her talents to the big and small screens, often playing exotic characters in films like Soldier of Fortune and shows like Columbo. Perhaps her most notable television role came in the form of Mama San in 4 episodes of MASH in the 1970s. Noel died after suffering a stroke at age 84. She met and married a soldier named Carleton Young in 1945. Carleton was also an actor, a character actor known for his distinctive deep voice. He'd appear in well over 200 productions beginning in the 1930s. His notable films include Reefer Madness, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. After his death at age 89, Noel kept his ashes until her death, at which time they were inurned here together. Their neighbor here is a musician named Luther Rabb. The singer, songwriter, and performer gained notoriety in the 60s and 70s as lead vocalist for the jazz rock group Ball and Jack, and later with the group War. Luther also played bass. One of the songs he co-wrote was Bust a Move, featured in the soundtrack of numerous films, including It, Pitch Perfect, and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Luther died at age 63. On the opposite side of the chapel is the shared niche of Leo Gordon and Lynn Cartwright. Leo's height and looks made him perfect for playing brutish characters and bad guys, often in westerns, leading to a Golden Boot Award in 1997. His films include Hondo, Riot in Cell Block 11, and Maverick. And television appearances include on Gunsmoke, The Virginian, and Bonanza. Leo is also a writer of screen and teleplays. He wrote for shows like Adam 12 and Tombstone Territory, and novelty B horror films like Attack of the Giant Leeches and The Wasp Woman. And the war film, You Can't Win Them All. Leo died at age 78. He was married to actress Lynn Cartwright. You fans of A League of Their Own will remember Lynn as the older version of Geena Davis's character, Dottie, in the 1992 film. But Lynn had been acting since the 50s, appearing in films like The Wasp Woman and Queen of Outer Space. She died from complications of dementia after she fractured her hip at age 76. Not far from here on the eastern wall is the niche of members of the Lasky family, a name familiar to you aficionados of Hollywood history. Jesse Lasky Jr. was the son of Hollywood pioneer Jesse Lasky. He followed in his father's footsteps into filmmaking, focusing on writing. He's remembered for his work on historical and biblical epics, penning screenplays for films like Samson and Delilah, Salome, and was one of several screenwriters on The Ten Commandments. He also wrote for shows like Rescue 8 and The Protectors, and penned some plays and novels as well. Lasky Jr. lived to be 77. He rests here with his sister, Betty Lasky, who was a Hollywood historian. Her books, Whatever Happened to Hollywood and RKO, The Biggest Little Major of Them All, are right here in the niche. She lived to be 94. Back out to the grounds, this is the Rose Garden area, where ashes are scattered or interred. Here we find a star of a different sort. Meet Corporal Harold Schultz. You may not know his name, but I'd wager you've seen a photo of him. Schultz was one of the participants in the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima, captured in this iconic photo. One of the most recognized from the war. Corporal Schultz was recently identified as the second man on the left in this photo. He survived the war and lived to be 70. Nearby is a wall of small plaques to those cremated here. Edith Fellows was a noted child actress in the 30s, her early roles including in films like She Married Her Boss and Tugboat Princess. Her role alongside Bing Crosby as the precocious orphan in the 1936 film Pennies from Heaven won her critical acclaim and is alluded to here on her plaque. She also highlighted her singing voice in films like Heart of the Rio Grande. But suffering a similar fate as fellow child star Jackie Coogan, she grew to discover that the fortune she had made in the movies as a child was squandered by her adult guardians after undergoing a bitter custody battle and enduring a controlling grandmother. Her career stalled in the 40s and 50s. She was encouraged to return to acting when a friend wrote a play about her life. She would take on guest roles in television until her retirement in 1995. Edith lived to be 88. In the Abbey of the Psalms, Sanctuary of Faith, we find the crypt of a woman whose epitaph introduced me to her. Bernice Petkere was a singer and songwriter known as the Queen of Tin Pan Alley, a collection of music writers and publishers that defined popular music in the early 20th century. Tin Pan Alley was a boys' club, but Bernice made her mark in it, writing international hits like Close Your Eyes and Lullaby of Leaves.
Rest your head on my shoulder and sleep. Close your eyes.
She also wrote radio themes for CBS. Her songs would be performed by the likes of Bing Crosby, Tony Bennett, Doris Day, Ella Fitzgerald, and many more. Bernice lived to be 98. Further into the Abbey, we find a newer section of glass front niches. This is the niche and one-of-a-kind urn of John Paragon. If you watched Pee-wee's Playhouse in the 80s and 90s, you recognize his urn as the genie box of Jambi the Genie. John played Jambi in some 40 episodes of the beloved show, granting Pee-wee a wish per day.
Wish? Did somebody say wish?
You fans of Seinfeld will also remember John for his role as Cedric, one of the gay street toughs on the show. After his death in 2021 from heart disease at the age of 66, John Paragon was cremated, his ashes held by his friend Elvira for a time, until they were placed here in this urn, an exact replica of the Jambi the Genie box. So when you stop by to pay your respects to John, make a wish. Perhaps Jambi will make it come true. Just around the corner is another famous funny man, David Lander. You fans of Laverne and Shirley will remember Lander as Squiggy on the beloved 70s and 80s sitcom in some 156 episodes.
Just calm down when you don't get excited, act casual. If they try to give you the kiss of death, play hard to get.
He'd make appearances on other shows like Family Matters and Married with Children, but much of his later career was dominated by his distinctive voice, which he would lend to animations like Tattooed Teenage Alien Fighters from Beverly Hills, A Bug's Life, and perhaps most notably as the Weasel Smartass, leader of the Toon Patrol on Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
We got a reliable tip-off. The rabbit was here and was corrugated by several others. Forget the bullshit.
Lander was also an avid Pirates fan, as you can see in this little window into his life. He died from complications of multiple sclerosis at age 73. Down the hall, we reach another newer glass front section and the niche of Marsha Hunt, one of Hollywood's longest-living actresses. Her career spanned more than 7 decades. She appeared in more than 100 film and TV productions in her career. Notable among them are Pride and Prejudice, Cry Havoc, The Human Comedy, and Johnny Got His Gun. In the 1950s, Marsha was wrongfully blacklisted during the McCarthy-era Red Scare. This led to her work in television, appearing in shows like Climax, Zane Grey Theater, The Twilight Zone, all the way up to Star Trek The Next Generation. Her final screen role was in the 2008 TV movie Empire State Building Murders. Marsha died from natural causes in 2022 at the age of 104. 2 spaces down is a child star you fans of Lucy might recognize. Jimmy Garrett played Lucy's son, Jerry Carmichael, in more than 50 episodes of The Lucy Show in the 60s. His niche contains snapshots with Lucy and even a letter from her. He also appeared in shows like My 3 Sons and Mr. Ed, and later in his career worked as a production accountant and financial coordinator in film and television. Jimmy died from complications of diabetes at age 66. Continuing down the hall, we find one of the most distinctive new monuments here in the mausoleum to a unique comedic performer named Judy Tenuta, the love goddess, immortalized here in bronze effigy. Her performances melded insult comedy, observational humor, music, and body on-stage antics in elaborate outfits. She hosted a comedy special on HBO and performed on national tours. Her accordion was used to punctuate her routine. 2 of her albums were nominated for Grammys for Best Comedy Album. As an actress, she appeared on The Weird Al Show and voiced characters on shows like Space Ghost, Coast to Coast, and Johnny Bravo. Nearby is her actual niche, featuring a floral urn and samples of her work, including her comedy albums and books. Judy died from ovarian cancer in 2022 at the age of 72. Nearby is another talented musician in these halls, Art Pepper. He was a noted jazz musician specializing in the alto saxophone. By the 50s, he had established himself as one of the most prominent alto saxophone players in jazz, associated with West Coast jazz. He played with greats like Benny Carter, Buddy Rich, and Chet Baker. He was also prolific in his output as band leader, releasing dozens of albums from the 50s to the 80s. Art died after suffering a stroke at age 56. The corridor opposite the courtyard south is the Sanctuary of Light. High on the wall is the crypt of Maude Fealy. The actress appeared in 37 films between 1911 and 1958. Her early career was as a leading lady in silent films like The Immortal Flame and Moths. Into the talkies, she appeared in smaller roles in films like Gaslight, The Buccaneer, and The 10 Commandments. She was close to Cecil B. DeMille, appearing in small roles in many of his productions. In fact, the DeMille estate paid for her funeral expenses after her death. Maude would dedicate her later career to teaching acting and drama, passing away at age 88. Over now to the Sanctuary of Hope in the Abbey of the Psalms, where we find the crypt of Henry Walthall. The actor was absolutely prolific in his output on stage and screen. Between 1908 and 1936, he appeared in more than 300 films. Perhaps his best-known role was that of the Little Colonel in 1915's The Birth of a Nation. Henry would be a regular in Griffith's films, including in his Edgar Allan Poe adaptation, The Avenging Conscience. He also played Robert Regent in Chandu the Magician and James Hamlin in London After Midnight. Henry would appear in 4 Best Picture Oscar nominees: Wings, 42nd Street, Viva Villa, and A Tale of Two Cities. Exhausted from his relentless work schedule, Henry collapsed on set after completing his scenes for the film China Clipper. He died weeks later at the age of 58. Just 1 space away is Tom Santschi. He was one of silent film's rugged leading men, a steely-eyed hero or villain in Western and action films. He would be nearly as prolific as his neighbor here, appearing in more than 300 films into the 1930s. Among his best-known performances was in the 1914 film The Spoilers. He also appeared in Hollywood's first cliffhanger serial, The Adventures of Kathleen. The talented Tom would also direct many of his own films, like His Fighting Blood. Come the talkies, he appeared in films like The Utah Kid. He died from a heart attack at just 50 or 52, depending on the birth year source. South of here is the New Beth Olam Mausoleum. In the Hall of David, high on the left wall, is the crypt of Ben Pollack. He was another of the great jazz band leaders in the 20s and 30s, a pioneer in the genre who would feature greats like Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman. His eye and ear for talent earned him the nickname the Father of Swing. His band would play for Broadway shows and was one of the most prolific bands of the era in terms of recordings. Ben would also appear in a handful of movies, often as himself, including The Glenn Miller Story. And his original compositions include Tin Roof Blues, later covered by artists like Joe Stafford as Make Love to Me. Facing financial struggles later in life, Ben grew despondent and hanged himself at the age of 67. In this same mausoleum, we find the crypt of Nat Perrin. He was a writer and producer known particularly for his work in comedy. He's remembered for contributing content and gags to several Marx Brothers films, like Duck Soup. He also co-wrote the Olsen and Johnson vehicle Hellzapoppen. And you fans of the Thin Man series will be curious to know that he wrote and produced Song of the Thin Man. Come the 50s, he'd become a notable writer and producer for television on shows like The Red Skelton Show. And I'd wager that many of you Hollywood Graveyard viewers are like me, fans of the original Addams Family series in the 60s. Nat Perrin produced all 64 episodes. He lived to be 93. Continuing south, we reach the old Beth Olam Mausoleum. Turning left into the Hall of Solomon, we find the crypt of Gus Arnheim, another one for you fans of big band music. He was a pianist and band leader in the 20s and 30s. His band had a several-year engagement at the Coconut Grove in Los Angeles. Notable talents he would play with include Bing Crosby and Russ Columbo. He had hits in the songs I Cry For You and Sweet and Lovely, both of which would appear in soundtracks of numerous film and TV productions in the decades to follow, from The Women and Amelie to How to Marry a Millionaire and Boardwalk Empire. Gus would also act in a few films, appearing often as himself, like Scarface, Bombshell, and Trocadero. He was just 57 when he died from a heart attack. There are a number of glass-front columbaria here in the Beth Olam Mausoleum. This is where we find the urn of Joseph Schildkraut. The Austrian-born actor appeared in a number of notable films in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. For his role as Captain Dreyfus in 1937's The Life of Emile Zola, he won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Other films include The Shop Around the Corner and The Diary of Anne Frank, playing Anne's father, Otto.
Anna, I still hoped. Yesterday I was in Rotterdam. I met a woman there. She'd been in Belgium with Anna. I know now.
Joseph was also nominated for a Primetime Emmy for his role as Rabbi Gottlieb in Sam Benedict. Other memorable TV appearances include on 77 Sunset Strip and 2 Turns in the Twilight Zone. In the silent era, Joseph had been a matinee idol, appearing alongside the likes of Myrna Loy and Norma Talmadge. Joseph Schildkraut died from a heart attack at age 67. Let's make our way now to the end of the Hall of Solomon, to the Alcove of Peace, to find the niche of Anne Savage. You fans of film noir will remember her as femme fatale Vera in 1945's Detour, which has since earned a cult following and was the first film noir and B-movie inducted into the National Film Registry. Between 1942 and 2007, she appeared in some 43 film and television productions, her busiest years being the 40s in numerous B-movies. After semi-retiring in 1991, she returned to the big screen playing Mother in the 2007 film My Winnipeg to critical acclaim, and died in her sleep after a series of strokes at age 87. Back out to the grounds, we reach section 14 just north of the mausoleum to find one for you fans of French music, Joe Dassin. He was born in New York to notable filmmaker Jules Dassin. The family moved to Europe during the Hollywood blacklist in the 50s, where he began appearing in small roles in his father's films. In the 60s, he began a career as a recording artist, becoming the first French-language singer to be signed to an American label. By the early 70s, Dassin's songs were topping the charts in France. His hits include Bip Bip, A Toi, and Les Champs-Élysées.
Oh, Champs-Élysées.
Joe was just 41 when he died suddenly from a heart attack while on vacation in Tahiti. Crossing the street east to Pineland, we find the grave of Carl Dane next to the road. As his name implies, Karl was a Danish actor, known for his comedic work in early Hollywood. Among his best-known work in the silent era are as Slim in the 1925 film The Big Parade, and as Giles in The Scarlet Letter. Karl also found a popular comedic partnership with George Arthur as Dane and Arthur. However, when motion pictures started talking, his thick Danish accent was something of a liability, and he had difficulty finding work. Broken despondent, Dane took his own life at age 47. His body went unclaimed, tagged with the note, "May have relatives in Denmark, hold for a while." Eventually, fellow Danish actor Gene Schultz stepped forward and insisted MGM fund his funeral and burial. This is his second marker, replacing the original one in recent years. Continuing north, we arrive at the Garden of Eternal Love. Just in from the road is the grave of that red-headed girl, Peggy Shannon. She began her career performing on stage in the Ziegfeld Follies and Earl Carroll's Vanities. In the late 20s, Peggy made her way to Hollywood, touted as the next it girl. She was hired to replace Clara Bow in The Secret Call 2 days after her arrival in Hollywood. She kept busy in those early years, appearing in numerous films like The Reckless Age and Hotel Continental. And you fans of the Our Gang series will remember her for her appearances in 2 episodes. But an increasing dependence on alcohol took a toll on her career and health. She died at just 34 after suffering a heart attack from advanced liver disease. Southeast of here is Section 13. Herein we find one for you fans of magic and illusion. Meet the desperado of deceit, David Avedon. For more than 30 years, he was regarded as America's premier pickpocket, performing in theaters all over the country and the world. He got his start at the Magic Castle right here in Hollywood and became well known for his pickpocket act. He even wrote a book on the subject. Avedon died from a heart attack at the age of 60. Continuing east, we reach Section 7. Just in from the road is the grave of Tom Bauer. You fans of the Die Hard movies will remember Tom for his role as Marvin in Die Hard 2. He would appear in around 180 film and television productions in his career, including the movies Beverly Hills Cop 2 and The Hills Have Eyes, and television shows like The Waltons, The X-Files, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as Pop Pop. Tom lived to be 86. At the eastern edge of this lawn, near the intersection, is the grave of James Michael Tyler. If you love the show Friends, you remember James as Gunther, the coffee shop worker in the popular sitcom, appearing in some 164 episodes in the 90s and 2000s. He got the role initially as an extra because he had worked as a barista and knew how to operate the cappuccino machine.
I loved you. No, I don't know if that changes your plans at all, but I thought you should know.
Gunther. Oh, I love you too.
You also saw him in episodes of Scrubs and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And his films include Foreign Correspondence. James died from cancer at age 59. Just north of here, also next to the road, is the grave of Corey LeBerry. He was a YouTube personality with a popular YouTube channel featuring pranks and other shenanigans. His last video was posted on May 9th, 2020, titled "Deleting this video in 24 hours." The video would not be deleted, because the next day, Corey would be dead. He was out celebrating his 25th birthday with friend and tattoo star Daniel Silva. After an evening of drinking, Silva was driving recklessly and crashed. Silva was injured, but Corey LeBerry died from his injuries on his 25th birthday. Daniel Silva would be sentenced to 1 year in prison for the accident. Turn your eyes north again and look for a musical grave. Here lies Skinny Ennis. Skinny is another chapter from the history book of jazz and big band in these grounds. Like some of his neighbors here, Skinny was a well-known band leader in the 30s through the 50s. The ensemble would become a popular feature in musical films of the era, Skinny appearing in them as either himself or an analog of himself. These include College Swing, Swing It Soldier, and Radio Stars on Parade. The band's theme song was Got a Date with an Angel, inscribed here on the stone. Skinny died after choking to death on a bone while eating at a Beverly Hills restaurant. He was 55. Skinny's wife outlived him by 50 years. Carmine had sung in Skinny's band for more than a decade. The upright marker was placed here in 2013 after her death at age 96. South of the lake is the Cathedral Garden Mausoleums. High on the wall behind the main building is the crypt of Ted Donaldson. He was a child actor in the 40s and 50s. Radio audiences of the era remember him for his role as Bud on the radio version of Father Knows Best. On film, he played Danny Mitchell in 8 films in the Rusty series, movies about a German Shepherd. Ted also played Neely in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and Pinky in Once Upon a Time, alongside Cary Grant. After retiring from acting in the 70s, he taught acting and worked in a bookstore. Ted died after suffering a fall at age 89. Out front of the mausoleum, above eye level, we find the niche of Alan Johnson. As inscribed here, he was a noted choreographer on stage and screen. He was nominated for 7 Primetime Emmys for choreography, winning 3. He would collaborate regularly with Mel Brooks, providing choreography for History of the World Part 1, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and The Producers. Alan also danced in the original Broadway production of West Side Story. He lived to be 81. Just east of here is the crypt of Anne Heche. Her acting career began on television, appearing in 141 episodes of the daytime soap Another World. She earned a Daytime Emmy for her work. On the big screen, she starred in movies like 6 Days, 7 Nights, Donnie Brasco, Wag the Dog, and Volcano. And on stage, she'd been nominated for a Tony for her performance in the Broadway revival of 20th Century. That same year, Anne was nominated for a Primetime Emmy for Gracie's Choice. Her sudden death in August 2022 at just 53 retains a degree of mystery about it. Anne was involved in and responsible for 3 consecutive motor vehicle collisions in a Los Angeles neighborhood. Before the final crash, Anne was seen speeding down a neighborhood street before crashing into the house at the end of the street. The car was embedded into the house, trapping Heche inside and catching fire. It took firefighters 45 minutes to extricate Anne. She had suffered severe burns and smoke inhalation. She was taken to the hospital and placed on life support, but after being declared brain dead, was taken off of life support on August 14th. The coroner's report stated that she was not impaired by illicit substances at the time of the accident, leaving unanswered questions about what led to the accident that day. Let's head into the Cathedral Mausoleum. If you've seen our previous videos, these next 2 stars will be familiar to you. We'll briefly touch on their story of being discovered in the Chapel of the Pines vault in recent years and moved here to Hollywood forever. But for the full stories, be sure to check out our videos Opening the Vault, the story of Chapel of the Pines, and the follow-up video Miracle on Catalina Street, the Edmund Gwenn story. Links in the description. Helen Chandler was an actress of stage and screen. She got her start on the New York stage in productions like Richard III, Macbeth, and she played Ophelia in Hamlet. Helen arrived in Hollywood right at the end of the silent era, making her screen debut in 1927's The Music Master. Audiences today remember her best for her role as Mina, Count Dracula's intended victim in the 1931 Universal film Dracula, alongside Bela Lugosi.
I had a frightful dream a few nights ago, and I don't seem to be able to get it out of my mind.
I hope you haven't taken my stories too seriously.
Other films include Outward Bound and Christopher Strong. According to Helen's family, her role in Christopher Strong most closely matched her true personality, a spirited soul.
Well, of course I love my mother, but I love my life more. Oh, let me have all the fun I can, Daddy. It's my safety valve, I'm warning you.
Well, as long as it's decent fun, there'll be no objections.
I'll keep it as decent as I can, darling. Now come along with me, and don't ask any questions.
By the late 30s, Helen returned to the stage, but an increasing dependence on alcohol took its toll on her career and health. She died at just 57 from complications of surgery for a bleeding ulcer. She was cremated at Chapel of the Pines. Her family decided to have her ashes placed in the community vault at Chapel of the Pines. Not an uncommon practice at that time, especially when finances were scarce. Her ashes were not simply unclaimed. In 2023, I teamed up with friend and fellow Hollywood historian Jessica Wall to catalog the thousands of urns in the Chapel of the Pines vault. In doing so, we rediscovered Helen's urn, after which we reached out to her next of kin and asked for their permission and blessing to have Helen's urn retrieved from the vault, which is off limits to the public, and moved to a niche here at Hollywood Forever. They agreed. So we teamed up with her family, Chapel of the Pines, Hollywood Forever, and through generous donations from you, the fans, gave Helen this new urn and niche, where the bright-eyed star from yesteryear can finally be visited by those who still love and remember her all these years later. Helen's neighbor here in the Valentino Shrine Columbarium was also her neighbor for decades in Vault 5 at Chapel of the Pines, just feet from one another. Here's the beautiful vintage urn and niche of Edmund Gwenn. He was born Edmund John Kellaway in London and began his career acting on stage, becoming a notable player in the West End and on Broadway. In those early years, acting was not yet seen as a reputable profession, and his father disapproved. Edmund would often wear elaborate disguises on stage and used a stage name to ensure no one would recognize him and inform his father. He began appearing in film in the silent era and soon made his way to Hollywood. Edmund would appear in a number of Alfred Hitchcock films, like The Trouble with Harry in 1955. But audiences today will always remember him as classic Hollywood's most beloved Santa Claus. He played Kris Kringle in 1947's Miracle on 34th Street.
Would you please tell her that you're not really Santa Claus? That there actually is no such person?
Well, I'm sorry to disagree with you, Mrs. Walker, but not only is there such a person, but here I am to prove it.
The role earned him a Golden Globe and the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He opened his acceptance speech by saying,
"Now I know there's a Santa Claus."
He would earn another Oscar nomination for his role in Mr. 880. Edmund died on September 6, 1959, just shy of his 82nd birthday. He was cremated at Chapel of the Pines. But for reasons that are not clear to this day, his urn was never retrieved or placed in a niche, surprising given the cost and effort of placing his ashes in this beautiful engraved urn. As the years passed, his urn was lost in the vault, misplaced at some point. The vaults are, for the most part, very well organized chronologically, but perhaps because of the large and irregular shape of Edmund's urn, most in vaultage being simple, stackable copper boxes, his urn was placed on a shelf out of chronological order. It had also been wrapped in a paper bag, making the label hard to read. There had been attempts made in the past to have Edmund's urn retrieved, but the problem was nobody could find it. It wasn't until our cataloging efforts in 2023, when we looked at and documented each and every urn, that Edmund's urn was finally found by our friend Jessica Wall, who was leading the cataloging efforts. After 64 years. So, as we had done with Helen, we reached out to Edmund's next of kin in England, teaming up with them, Chapel of the Pines, Hollywood Forever, and once again generous donations from you, the fans.
Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane.
To give Edmund this new home where he can finally be visited by those who love and remember him all these years later. It was truly a Christmas miracle. At the inurnment ceremony in December 2023, we even had a few Santa Clauses show up to pay their respects to a man who had inspired them. And for those of you who still believe in Christmas magic, you'll be curious to know that a few days after Christmas I went back to Edmund's niche, only to discover a walking cane had been placed there on Christmas Eve. If you've seen Miracle on 34th Street, you know exactly what that means.
No, it can't be. It must have been left here by the people that moved out.
Maybe. Maybe I didn't do such a wonderful thing after all.
Further down the opposite corridor, we find the niche of Stella Stevens. The model and actress appeared in more than 140 film and TV productions in her career. Her memorable films include Girls, 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 The Nutty Professor, and The Poseidon Adventure. Stella was a regular on TV as well, playing Phyllis on Santa Barbara, Lupe May Sanders on Flamingo Road, and making memorable guest appearances on shows like Bonanza, Love Boat, Newhart, and more. As a model, she posed for Playboy and was named by Playboy as one of the 100 sexiest women of the 20th century. Stella died from complications of Alzheimer's at age 89. She rests here next to her husband, musician Bob Kulick. After Bob's death in 2020, his urn was originally placed in the niche where Stella is now. However, after her death, he was moved to this adjacent niche, and now they're side by side. Bob was a guitarist and producer who worked with some of the biggest names in rock, including Kiss, Alice Cooper, Lou Reed, and Wasp. He would play on 3 Kiss albums between 1977 and 1982, and he played on the Wasp albums The Crimson Idol and Still Not Black Enough. He would also produce for bands like Motorhead, and even wrote and performed a song played by SpongeBob SquarePants, Sweet Victory. Bob died from heart disease at the age of 70 and is now, according to his brother, at peace, playing his guitar as loud as possible. His ashes rest in a miniature road case. Let's head back out into the LA sun and find the grave of Skelton Knaggs, just east of the lake. The British character actor is remembered for appearing in a number of classic Universal horror films. His distinctive visage made him perfect for the genre. These include The Invisible Man's Revenge, House of Dracula, and Terror by Night. Other notable films include The Ghost Ship, and he was also a regular performer in the Dick Tracy series in the 40s and 50s. Skelton was just 43 when he died from cirrhosis of the liver. Not far east of here is the grave of Frances Drake. The actress is best remembered for playing Eponine in the 1935 film adaptation of Les Miserables. She also regularly played the damsel in distress in horror and sci-fi films in the 30s, like Mad Love and The Invisible Ray. Frances retired from acting in the 40s. She lived to be 87, passing away in 2000. Turning north, we find one of the most badass new tombstones here at Hollywood Forever, marking the final resting place of Howie Pyro, the ultimate weirdo and a true punk. Howie was a musician, specifically a bass player. He was founding member of a number of punk bands, including The Blessed, Freaks, D-Generation, and PCP Highway. Pyro also briefly played bass with Danzig in the early 2000s. On radio, Howie Pyro hosted the show Intoxica Radio with Howie Pyro. Later in life, Pyro suffered from liver disease and had to undergo a liver transplant. He died from COVID-19 related pneumonia while recovering from his liver transplant. He was 61. His grave was originally marked with a simple flat stone. In 2024, this impressive new monument was donated by his friend Linda Ramone, widow of Johnny Ramone. Continuing north, we stop at one of several vase-shaped monuments here. This is the grave of Charles Christie. He was the brother of Al Christie, who we visited in our last tour here. While Al was more directly involved in the creative process of filmmaking, directing, and producing, his brother Charles was involved in the business and finance end. They both got their start working for Hollywood's first permanent motion picture studio, the Nestor Film Company. In 1916, the brothers formed their own studio, Christie Film Company. They made comedies under contract with Universal. The Christies would also pioneer race relations in movies, producing in the late 20s the first talking pictures made for and featuring African Americans. Charles would also be responsible for administering the Motion Picture Relief Fund. The studio went under in the Great Depression, after which Charles went into real estate. He lived to be 75. Next to the lake, we find the grave of a beloved funny man whose recent passing shocked and saddened the world. Paul Reubens was best known for his childlike alter ego, Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee's iconic bow tie featured right here on his marker. The character was developed as part of a stage act, leading to an HBO special in 1981, then a motion picture in 1985, Pee Wee's Big Adventure, directed by Tim Burton.
Why don't you make me?
Why don't you make me? Because I don't make monkeys, I just train them. Oh, Pee-wee, listen to reason. Oh, come on! I'm listening to reason. Pee-wee!
That's my name, don't wear it out.
Reubens then took his character to the small screen, the children's series Pee Wee's Playhouse, which ran from 1986 to 1991. The show earned him 2 Emmys from 17 nominations. He'd continue to collaborate with Tim Burton, appearing as Penguin's father in Batman Returns, and voicing Locke on The Nightmare Before Christmas. Other feature films include Mystery Men and Blow. And Reubens made regular appearances on television on shows like 30 Rock, Gotham, The Blacklist, and Murphy Brown. Unbeknownst to fans, Paul suffered from leukemia and lung cancer later in life. He passed away at the age of 70. Paul was cremated, his ashes interred here next to the lake. According to reports, this marker is just temporary until a more permanent monument can be created. And finally, also overlooking the lake not far from Paul, is the legendary Burt Reynolds. The mustachioed leading man is remembered for roles in films like Deliverance, The Longest Yard, the Cannonball Run films, and the Smokey and the Bandit films.
This is a bandit, son. Can we slide right into your convoy there?
Come ahead on, Bandit. We'll slip you into the rocking chair.
10-4. We're going in the rocking chair, honey.
Good.
And in 1998, Burt was nominated for an Oscar for his role as Jack Horner in Boogie Nights.
Jack Horner, filmmaker.
Really?
Yeah, filmmaker. Adult films, exotic pictures.
Television audiences also enjoyed his work on shows like Gunsmoke as Quint, the title characters in Dan August and Hawk, and playing Wood Newton on Evening Shade. Burt Reynolds was voted the world's #1 movie actor from 1978 to 1982. He died from a heart attack at the age of 82. He was cremated, his ashes held by his family for a time before being interred here. His grave was initially temporarily marked with a small flat stone while this monument was created, featuring a bust of Burt as Bandit. It was placed here in September 2021. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Coming soon to Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a massive new mausoleum. A high-rise for the dead. Even the peafowl are excited for this one. It's known as the Gower Mausoleum. If you visited Hollywood Forever in recent years, you've likely seen this mausoleum under construction. Hollywood Forever was gracious enough to offer us a sneak peek into this new mausoleum before it opens to the public sometime in the coming months. So come along, let's take a peek inside and enjoy the magnificent views. The mausoleum is 5 stories, said to be the tallest in North America. It has a capacity of approximately 13,000 entombments. One of the striking features you'll notice is the crypt facades, which are quartzite imported from Brazil, cut to book match the patterns, many in these striking blue and purple tones. Perhaps the coolest feature is the view from the rooftop, a panorama of Los Angeles all around you. From the cemetery below to the studios, downtown off in the distance, and of course, the Hollywood sign. This stunning view, once reserved only for the birds, will soon be enjoyed by the dead, and can soon be enjoyed by you as well on your next visit to Hollywood Forever. And who knows what stars and notable figures will someday call this mausoleum their forever home.